Hello, everybody. This is the time of the year that my synagogue's men's club runs the service, and they have anointed yours truly to deliver the Torah introduction, the Haftorah introduction, and the sermon. I guess I did such a bang-up job last year. I've been recruited again, but it'll take about 18 minutes, give or take. So have a little bit of patience, and here we go. A gitten Shabbos Solomon sitzen du in Shula rein und always in Leben Teichland. Shabbat Shalom to everybody, whether you're sitting in the pews or out there in Livestream land. It's that time of the year. Only 5 Parshiot are named for specific biblical figures. This week, we read one of them. Our protagonist, Moses' father-in-law, Yitro, Jethro, for today's discussions, is a fitting representative for what Jewish men's clubs around the world represent. Last year, I mused that Jethro would have been an exceptional, if not prototypical candidate for the Federation of Jewish Men's Clubs Kiruv Initiative. Though in a way, we're all Jews by choice, by virtue of our souls having borne witness to the Sinaitic covenant. Several times since then, Jethro has inspired me while I was on this bima, laying the Parshas HaShavua, grateful to amen those who had their first aliyah. He's got a good ear, and I'd like to think Jethro's accomplishments and approach inspired those as well who participated in our men's club's recent Hearing Men's Voices program. Though it was a bit out of my comfort zone, I worked within the structure and led the Federation of Jewish Men's Clubs Imagine Life module, addressing trauma. Frankly, we had fruitful, spirited discussions. And though we covered various contemporary issues, Kohelet reminds us, and Kol Chadash Tachat Hashemesh, there ain't nothing new under the sun. As broadly as it can be defined, traumatic events, more generally tsuris, factor into our parsha. Without them, with the Midianite priest Jethro, no old man wandering lonely, father-in-law of the octogenarian Moses, have shown up nitten drinnen, leading off the reading. We begin reading that Jethro heard all that God did for Moses and his people Israel in taking them out of Egypt. We continue reading about an immediate family reunion, complete with sacrifices and repast. The prophet Obadiah has informed us that there is wisdom among the nations. As we read on, here's an example. Jethro will shape the Israelite judicial system. Before we read of Revelation, its immediate build-up, the great theophany at Sinai, and its immediate aftermath. You'll be asked to rise when the 10 Commandments will be chanted by the Baal HaKriya at the break on page 441 in the Red Eitz Chaim Chumash. Take it from me, it's there. Some say it's the best book ever. It's an engrossing story. Follow along with today's reading, which begins on page 432. Okay, so after the Torah session happens, and of course everybody is masked up, and COVID protocol that is followed in this town applies. For my Devar Haftorah, I will start this way. Me again. If it seems this week Bnei Yisrael was, as Rashi, one of the medieval Meforshim commentators, commented, I'll fix that up. If it seems this week Bnei Yisrael was, as Rashi commented, Ki ish echad v'lev echad, as if one person and one heart, thus giving us a break, as it were, from their episodic broaching. The 5th book of the prophet's first verse introduces Yeshayahu ben Amoz, Isaiah the prophet, who provides an update. There are no warm-up shots for this Isaiah. He reprimands the covenant people in the second verse, which reads, "Hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth, for the Lord has spoken. I reared children and brought them up, and they have rebelled against me." Much of this book features Isaiah's admonishing Israel to change its corrupt ways, lest it decline into the dustbin of history. Why did the sages match Isaiah's 6th chapter with this eponymous Sedra? Perhaps for a reason I would have placed it as the 1st chapter. It features his vision of Der Eibishter's coronation, paralleling that inaugurated by Moses at Revelation. The Haftarah's concluding verses are uplifting, though they have been misinterpreted by many in recent millennia. Perhaps that will be another discussion for another day. Officially, peace is endless, a hopeful prophecy indeed. Halavai. Follow along as the Baal HaHaftarah begins chanting the blessings which bracket the recitation on page 452. Okay, so the Haftarah will be read. There will be a few prayers afterwards. There'll be a fully masked Torah parade. The Torah will be put back into the ark, and I will be summoned to deliver the sermon, which I will start like this. Pa'am shlishit glida. I used that line last year, and if you don't remember what it means, or even if you do, right now I'm going to hit you with some more Hebrew. En mukdam u'meuchar b'Torah. Wait a second. Huh? What? Now? Doesn't that En mukdam u'meuchar b'Torah. There is no early and late in the Torah. The Meforshim would agree that the Chumshei Torah, collectively, the 5 books of Moses, is not merely a chronological history book, but essentially an interconnected lesson in living, which is continually relevant in some fashion. Some Meforshim posit that this maxim applies right smack at the beginning of this week's Parshat Yitro. Let's follow the Talmudic machloikis, which form the backbone of biblical exegesis, which gives rise to sermons delivered by the likes of our Mahaya Da'atra, our local in-house sages who are enjoying a sermonizing break today. We had just read, and by just I mean last week's Parsha's conclusion. We've been kept in some suspense. We just read that Moses had built a physical memorial after being instructed to record Israel standing up to the arch enemy Amalek, Yamach Shemam, L'chaim. Though today's reading in Sefer Shemot begins with chapter 18, the text is not specific about quite what made its way to Jethro, nor wherever he was when he heard the news. The text presents us with no particular travelogue this time. So, nitten drinnen, when did Jethro, accompanied by Moses' wife and 2 children in tow, when did Jethro show up at the encampment by the mountain of God? And why mention it now? This forms a basis for interesting discussions in the Talmud's tractate Zvachim, feast offerings. To wit, there are some of them that say Jethro came before the giving of the Torah, like the order of the sections. And there are some of them that say that he came after the giving of the Torah. Nachmanides generally holds that the Torah's events should be understood in chronological order, unless otherwise imperative. Ibn Ezra contends that Jethro's arrival, family rejoicing, and professional guidance all occur after Revelation. Rashi is silent regarding the timing of the arrival and rejoicing covered in the first Aliyah, but specifically places the judicial consultation and formation in the second and third Aliyot to be after Revelation. which follows onward. These three Gedolim are presented in the order of the arguments, but their biological timeline is Rashi, Ibn Ezra, Nachmanides, which is how we'll proceed. Tashma, let's learn in the order of their times. Rashi's got no timing challenge to the first Aliyah's events. What news or rumors would Jethro have heard? As a matter of fact, Rashi comments that Jethro heard about the miracles at Yam Suf and of the battle with Amalek. Beginning the second Aliyah, however, Rashi cites proofs supporting his assertion that the next day, when Moses sat to judge the people, in his father-in-law's full view, was the day after Yom Kippur. This has to have been after Revelation, which was 50 days after Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Exodus. He expounds that before the giving of the Torah, one could not say, "And I do make them know the statutes of God and his laws as written in Shemot chapter 18, verse 16, which, as Rashi notes, are part of the Torah." From the day when the Torah was given until Yom Kippur, as Rashi continues, Moses did not sit down to judge the people, since immediately after the Torah was given, low power mode, from the day when the Torah was given until Yom Kippur, as Rashi continues, Moses did not sit down to judge the people, since immediately after the Torah was given, he ascended the mountain and descended only on the 17th of Tammuz, when he broke the tablets in pieces. On that next day, the 18th of Tammuz, Moses again ascended the mountain early in the morning and stayed there 80 days, descending on the Day of Atonement. Consequently, he continues, this section is not placed in its chronological order, for the second and third Aliyot's readings, ending with, Moses let his father-in-law go, and he, means Jethro, went his way into his own land, was not said before the second year after the Exodus. For even according to the view of those who say that Jethro's arrival was before the giving of the Torah, Moses' father-in-law's dismissal to his own land did not take place until the 20th day of the second month of Iyar of the second year, when Bnei Yisrael broke camp, bound for their promised land, as will be recounted in Parshat Ba'alotcha, which will be read 22 weeks from today, or Saturday. In contrast to Rashi, Ibn Ezra claims that chapters 18 and 19 as a unit is out of chronological order because the Torah is trying to draw a comparison between scoundrel Amalek and what some would sympathize as a righteous Gentile, Jethro. Indeed, this theme would continue to ring true through the ages, even to current times. In generations following their re-entry into their promised land, in wars against latter-day Amalekites, King Saul warned Jethro's Kenite descendants to stand clear of pending conflict. Though this sets us up for the Purim story and concomitant assimilation issues colored in indeterminable shades of gray, it would lead to another set of discussions more appropriate for another time. Mark your calendars. Purim is 8 weeks from yesterday, and a memo to the relevant men's club committee chair. Get those Pesach wine orders ready. As opposed to Rashi, Nachmanides is not troubled by the timing of the recounting of Jethro's multiple dismissals, as he sees them as two separate events spread out over time. Nachmanides finds it difficult to understand Ibn Ezra's conclusion that Jethro's arrival, as noted in the first Aliyah, comes after Revelation. As proof, he cites these psukim found in Deuteronomy's Parshas Ve'etchanan. You have but to inquire about bygone ages that came before you, ever since God created man upon earth, and from one end of heaven to the other. Has anything as grand as this ever happened? Or has its like ever been known? Has any people heard the voice of a God speaking out of a fire as you have and survived? Now take it from me, at this point it's much easier for me to chant that in Hebrew than to read an English translation. If this reading is out of chronological sequence, Nachmanides continues, essentially Moses would have been much more effusive about the events of Sinai. Coming down with fire, lifting spirits higher, as I described in my sermon last year. While he was in his country, Nachmanides surmises, Jethro immediately heard that God had brought Israel out of Egypt, whereupon Jethro left his country and reached where Moses had been camped prior to the giving of the Torah at Har Sinai. Scripture, however, does not narrate that Moses related the matter of revelation to his father-in-law, for it hadn't yet occurred. It's self-evident, therefore, that had it already happened, Moses would have told his father-in-law about it at that encampment. Despite all the sojournings and wanderings, mamish, ways would be an Israeli invention. Nachmanides did not have the advantage of modern technology, but he was closer in time to the sages. Citing the Tana, Yoshua ben Hananiah, Jethro's aim was to travel from Midian to Rephidim. Dafka, Har Sinai was in or on the way. Furthermore, unlike Ibn Ezra, Nachmanides is not troubled with Jethro making Olah and Zvachim offerings to God happening out of chronological order. Ibn Ezra says these offerings would have been done after the Mishkan's completion on the 25th day of Kislev. Nachmanidean thought would refute this, since revelation had yet to occur, and not being an MOT, Jethro wasn't bound by the associated Chukim u'Mishpatim, rules and regs. Shine, that's it. 2 sets of Jews, 3 opinions. There are those of you who may be thinking, where's my current contemporary pop cultural reference? In his comments on Pirkei Avot, Dr. Rabbi Abraham Twersky writes that coincidences are really miracles where God wishes to remain anonymous. In the midst of composing this Devar Torah, breaking news from another Jethro flashed across my iPhone. After a 23-year break in the rock wilderness, Jethro Tulls got an album of new music titled The Zealot Gene, which is also the name of the first track. I'll leave you with its relevant opening lyrics. Half of us are in the apple, half of us are in the pie, all of us are in the pudding. Please rise and open your blue Sidurim as the Chazan leads us in the Musaf service on page 155. There you go. I appreciate all the good words and all the support, and tune in next time I have something semi-important to say. Have a good Shabbos, everybody. Peace out.